What the Pell is up, everybody? This is Pelicans Plus, presented by Boot Crew Media with your host, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. Before we get started today, make sure if you're listening on YouTube, you subscribe, drop a like, drop a comment based on what you're thinking of today's episode as well. If you're listening on any podcasting platform, make sure you subscribe or follow depending on where you are listening on said platform. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, you leave that rate and review. That really helps us out. We're sitting around 50 right now, but trying to get that up and up and up. And if you would do so, that would really help us out over there. Also, tell a friend about the podcast / YouTube channel. It can never hurt to talk a little more Pels with your homies. So it's been a while since we last recorded, had Mason Ginsberg of the Bourbon Street Shots on the show / the In the Know podcast. And since that pod, the Pelicans are 2-1. So 66% win percentage. I'd like to say it had something to do with me, but I don't think so. So one of those wins coming against the Washington Wizards. I believe that was last Wednesday night, 124-106. Bradley Beal, of course, going for 40 plus in a 10th loss this season where he scores 40 or more, which is just insane. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this before. Beal is balling just for a horrible team. And what this is for me, it's reminiscent of when when Kobe was playing with the Lakers between the Shaq and the Gasol years, those years where Kobe would go out and score 60 points and the Lakers would lose. This is when Kobe was just absolutely going off and the Lakers would lose. This was when he was, I believe the trade rumors were with him and the Chicago Bulls. So crazy stuff. I can't imagine what life would be like, honestly, if Kobe had gone to the Bulls. But in that win over the Wizards, B.I. and Zion both went for 32. It was a good win. The Wizards did look like they were starting to come back and responded and ultimately pulled off the win, the 124-106 win over the Washington Wizards. So not something to celebrate too much. It should have been a 124-106 win, if not, by more. So it's a win. That's what matters. And then the Pels followed that with a win over the Milwaukee Bucks, 131-126 on national television, need I mind you, which is pretty rad. This is what we all thought the Pelicans were capable of this season, if we're being real. Not shooting 70% from deep, not beating a team like the Milwaukee Bucks on a regular basis, but at least playing like this and being competitive with the top teams in the NBA. It was awesome. This is the best game we've ever seen from Lonzo in a Pelicans uniform. Probably the best game we've seen by Eric Bledsoe. Not probably. Definitely the best game we've seen from Eric Bledsoe this season in a Pelicans uniform. And that's what the Pelicans needed to have happen in order for them to beat a team like the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, Griff mentioned it during the broadcast of the following game against the Rockets. The Rockets game on Saturday night. Griff mentioned it during the broadcast. He said he thought that those trade rumors really motivated Zoe and Bled, and it was completely unprompted by him saying that. So maybe they did, and maybe you'll need to talk trade rumors more frequently because that was the best game we've seen from both of them. That was I don't know how the Pels pulled it off other than the fact that they shot lights out for a little while in that first half and somehow responded when the Bucks went to make their run. Giannis going for 38. Also, to boot on all of that, Pelicans had 4 players go for 20 plus: Bledsoe, Zion, Brandon Ingram, and Lonzo. And this was a game, obviously, I think what I just mentioned, the trade rumors probably motivated Eric Bledsoe and Lonzo Ball, but the reason the Pelicans won is because of those two shining the way they did. And that's not something you're going to be able to rely on a regular basis, and that is why they should be traded. Lonzo's played pretty well as of late. Didn't have a great game against the Rockets, but nobody really did other than Zion. And his trade value is going to go up the more games he has like this, but it's not going to be consistent. So do it while the trade value values high. And Eric Bledsoe is the leading three-point percentage maker on this team, so I'm not sure that the Pels are going to go for a trade for him, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, I don't want to get into that too much yet, but we will. So stay patient, stay with me. Then there was that loss to the Rockets. The Pels pretty much called it quits with 5 minutes to go. Put the backups in, Melly, Wenyen, Kyra. Yeah, put all those guys in. It was a 126 to 112 loss to the Rockets. And for those of you who aren't necessarily following the NBA to the degree, the entire NBA to the degree that you do follow the Pelicans, this really, it was a 14-point loss. That 48-point second quarter was awful. But in the grand scheme of things, this wasn't that bad of a loss. The Rockets, second best team, I think, in terms of efficiency in the NBA, in terms of defense. Christian Wood, obviously a damn good basketball player. We don't have to get into the fact that the Pels had him for a little while. Victor Oladipo, talented. PJ Tucker, obviously going to be a really good defensive player. And then John Wall, kind of looking like old John Wall to at least some degree. So the loss wasn't all that bad, if we're being real. It sucks. Not what you wanted to have happen. That second quarter, again, 48-point second quarter by the Houston Rockets outscored the Pels 48 to 22. And the thing about this loss and in that quarter is there appears to always be a quarter where the Pels get popped in the mouth. Always, without a doubt. Usually it's the third quarter. This game, it happened to be the second quarter. After taking an 8-point lead into the second quarter, the Pelicans were outscored by 26. So this was to an extra degree. And to me, this game, the entire second, third, fourth quarter looked like the Pels were on the second half of a back-to-back. That's what it looked like. First quarter, not so much. They looked a little fresh. And then Stan Van Gundy didn't go into his bench like he said he was going to, and it all kind of faltered. Is it an excuse to allow 48 points in the second quarter? No, it's not. Believe it or not, absolutely not. And this is something that this team needs to learn, how to respond when they're punched in the mouth. I talked about it against the Wizards. I talked about how they did it against the Bucks. But if they don't learn how to consistently respond, if they don't learn how to do that on a regular basis, that is why they're going to continue to lose games. 7-11 as opposed to 7-22 or 7-23 it was last season. I know they started off 6-22. After that, it's a little up in the air. But 7-11 compared to 7-23, not as bad. Still not good compared to the expectations that the Pelicans had going into this season of possibly getting in the playoffs, possibly competing there. 7-11 isn't where this team wants to be. And had they known how to respond in situations where they get popped, rather than getting stagnant offensively, rather than making Brandon Ingram force up shots, rather than not going back to their defensive principles, if they learn how to do that, that is going to be fundamental to how they win games in the future. Because if they can't do that, they're going to continue to lose games like this. And popped in the mouth versus 48-22, those are honestly kind of different things. This was being hit with a chair in the face. But they got to learn when the other team makes runs how to buckle down, how to continue to be patient, how to chip away at leads. Because, I mean, I've been saying it. They got to learn to continue to be patient. And I know that's a trigger word for a lot of Pelicans fans. Be patient in trying to make it back into these games. Don't expect to do it all at once. Don't step into a three-pointer without initiating the offense. Play with pace. Actually defend somebody. Play it possession by possession rather than got to make it all up at once. Well, I hope we get the lead back eventually. It just doesn't work like that in the NBA. These games are long. And the other team's going to make runs. And somebody else is going to get hot. And if the Pelicans can't respond, if they don't learn how to respond, they're not going to win a lot of games in the NBA this season. Obviously, defense is a problem. Obviously, the offense is a problem. I think they're byproducts of the inability to respond. And maybe it's flipped. Maybe I don't have that right. But we see the problem. It's about the diagnosis and what to do going forward. Stan Van Gundy clearly thinks it's the defense. He thinks it's the pride. He thinks it's the intensity. He thinks it's how they figure out how to have more energy on the defensive end of the floor. And yes, I think that's a massive part of it. But it's clearly taken a while to get that figured out. Maybe you can figure out something more in the short term that leads to that long-term success. Maybe it's building a little more rapport with them in the short term so you can really say, hey, this is clearly a problem. This is what we need to address. It's getting a little old talking about these things, but it's a long NBA season. We're probably going to be talking about it for a little while with this young team, this team that needs to figure out a lot of things going forward. And I wanted to wrap all of those up because there were points to be made about all of them. All had things to be gleaned from those games. And one thing I think we're all getting a little annoyed with, and it might not be in all of these games, but especially in this most recent game, is the lack of minutes from Kira Lewis Jr. If you clicked on this link, that's probably why you're here. If you're on YouTube, because we're live. And if you didn't know that, we do go live every time that we record on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast and you want to get that notification, go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. Anyway, here's the thing about this, about the lack of Kira Lewis minutes. In reference to the fact that he was the 13th overall pick, this is not the NFL. And bear with me for this analogy. I'm going deep into my bag. Excuse me. Going deep into my bag like the fries at the bottom. We're not in a situation where all we've seen is the starter be bad. So what I'm doing here is referencing like the quarterback position in the NFL draft. We're not in a situation where all we've seen is the starting quarterback be bad. This is not, Tyrod Taylor and Baker Mayfield with the Browns, which right now might not be the best analogy, or Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert with the Chargers. And it's a little bit off because of Tyrod Taylor having that injection and the punctured lung and all that stuff. So maybe not the greatest example, but I think you can catch my drift here. What I'm saying is we've seen Kira, and it's not we've seen Kira at the collegiate level. We've seen, which we have, and he was pretty damn good at Alabama. We've seen him play at the NBA level, and we've seen him play well. It's not like we've just seen a little bit and he wasn't that good and he was a little flustered and he just needs more minutes to get more comfortable. He probably had those butterflies. He said he said that in post-game media sessions. He's had the butterflies, but then he gets into the flow of the game and he feels comfortable. We've seen him play, and we've seen him play well. This isn't a projection. This isn't a why hasn't the young guy played, or this isn't a why haven't we given this guy a shot yet. This is we've seen this guy play. He's incredibly quick off the dribble. He's got basketball IQ beyond his years. He's composed. He's consistent, and he makes fearless plays. He makes cross-court passes. He is consistent when you're not getting consistent production from your starters. And we've seen the high be really high with Eric Bledsoe and Lonzo Ball, especially in that win over the Bucks. 27 points from Lonzo. I think it was 25 from Eric Bledsoe. And maybe Kira Lewis would have finished with, 15-5 had he played those minutes. But he wouldn't turn the ball over. He's turned the ball over once so far in his career. Shout out to Louis Prejean for finding out that stat. By the way, check out, I think it's In the Wing or From the Wing, his new podcast. Check that out. He does an awesome job. We know what we're getting from Kira Lewis. This isn't saying he needs to play 30-plus minutes tonight. That's not what I'm saying. That'd be ridiculous. Again, he is young. All that I'm saying is that he should get 15, 20 minutes a night. maybe even 10 to 15 minutes a night. But he has to get in there. He has to be part of the rotation because that's what he's going to be eventually. He's going to be that 30-plus minute a night guy. There we go. Because he will be a point guard, and he will be a damn good point guard. 15 to 20 minutes a night right now is fair, especially considering the lack of consistency you're getting from Lonzo Ball, the lack of consistency you're getting from Eric Bledsoe, even though he is the best three-point shooter on this team so far this season by percentage. I mean, he's a good basketball player. Find him a spot in the rotation. Like, I get it. The guard room is crowded. The guard position is crowded on this team. I understand that. You got Bledsoe. You got Lonzo. You got Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You got Kyra. You got Eric Bledsoe to a degree. I mean, JJ Redick, which we'll get into that in a second. When a player is talented, you figure it out. You know how much I want to see Wenyen Gabriel play. You know I want to see him get more minutes. But the thing about Kyra is he has high value, and we know it. We have seen it. A reasonable sample size. He was good at Alabama, too. This isn't Wenyen, who was a role player at Kentucky and has been trying to figure it out, been in the G League, little raw. He's very raw still. Gonna foul, gonna make mistakes. And Kyra will probably make mistakes the more minutes he gets. But we've seen him be good. He's turned the ball over one time. One time in his, minimal minutes this season. I think he's played 90 minutes total, roughly that. And another big reason we've needed to talk about this today is the fact that Stan Van Gundy had one of the strangest quotes I have probably ever seen to date. And that was the fact that, well, let's see here. Let's see if I can find it. Excuse me. This was the quote from Stan Van Gundy post-media session. And I tweeted this out and got quite a bit of attention. He said, quote, "We've got a lot of guys at the same spots. Every time Kyra's gotten any kind of opportunity, he's looked good doing it. The only thing that Kyra needs to do is get from 160 pounds to 175 pounds and get from 19 years old to 20 or 21. This got a lot of people heated on the timeline, I can tell you that. A lot of people, a lot of Pelicans fans did not like that quote in the slightest. A large portion responding saying that the Pelicans need to fire Stan Van Gundy. And the latter one being, who cares how big or old he is, he's just a good basketball player. And I am with that second one. When I heard that quote, I knew it needed to get out because it was something. And I'll tell you that. It was something for sure. And, like, I get it to a small degree. I do. When he said he doesn't need to be 19, he needs to be 20 or 21, what I am assuming he means is not just the number of age. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is he just needs more experience. Which I get it. I kind of get it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm saying that it kind of makes sense. And in terms of weight, yeah, that makes sense. I think Kyra actually does weigh 175 already. Maybe he wants him to weigh a little bit more. I don't know. And in terms of weight, he means like just not being beat up so much. And yeah, that makes sense. And it's not like Kyra's been beat up a lot, but it will save him maybe some injuries in the future. He'll just get beat up less on the court in those high impact situations, like driving to the basket, stuff like that. But a lot of what this does is emphasize the fact that Bled and or Lonzo need to be traded. If it's crowded, if that guard position is crowded, here's a crazy concept. Get rid of the inconsistent players and put in a young guy who can be part of a core going forward. If you're listening on the podcast, I just did the mind-blown thing. And maybe they're not seeing much of a market in return for Bled or Zeno. Maybe that's it. Like, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Fine. We'll say that's the issue. That's why they haven't been traded. Then wait it out. But this kid is too damn talented to keep him off the court much longer. This draft was supposed to be a weak draft, not supposed to be worth anything, going to be one of the worst draft classes in years. It's showing that that is not the case. And seeing some lists of like top 10 likelihood of winning Rookie of the Year, I see guys on that list where I'm like, Kyra's probably better than that player. Kyra's probably got a better future, and future versus Rookie of the Year doesn't really align. I mean, I think Tyreke Evans won Rookie of the Year when Steph was a rookie, so that'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about there. But Kyra needs to get more minutes. That's the bottom line. That is the bare minimum. And preferably in the first half, not in situations where the Pelicans are getting blown out. Because he can contribute to this team. I'm going to reiterate all those things that I love about Kyra that he's made clear. If I can find it. Give me 1 second. I don't remember. Quick off the dribble. Consistent. Fearless. Composed. And he's just good. Like, that's all you need to know. That is it. Kyra Lewis is a good basketball player, and he needs to be a part of this lineup on a consistent basis. Again, I'm not saying 30-plus minutes a night. I'm not. Because that'd be ridiculous for a rookie when you've got the rest of the talent on this roster. 15 to 20 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes at the least. But he should be playing. He should be playing. Another hot topic as of late in the world of the Pelicans would be the fact that JJ Redick has become a potential trade piece for the Pelicans, and quickly it's become more and more apparent that he will probably be traded. I addressed this on bootcrewmedia.com, wrote an article. If you want to check that out, bootcrewmedia.com, BOOTKREWE, media.com. It was really fun to write. It's also on my Twitter feed too. So initially, when we heard the rumors about Redick, it was a pairing of him and Lonzo. The Pels are looking to trade, or they've been taking calls and have been really interested in what they've been offered, stuff like that, about Lonzo and JJ Redick. And then later on, we heard a little bit about Eric Bledsoe. Not a lot, but a little bit. And now, I believe it was yesterday, there's a report from Shams Charania that there are 3 teams that the Pelicans are focusing on trading JJ Redick to. Excuse me. All in the Northeast. Sixers, the Celtics, and the Nets. And this is because JJ lives in Brooklyn. He's a veteran. He's been around the league a bunch, and Griff is clearly working with him to try to get him to a team where he lives, or close to where he lives with his family. His family lives in Brooklyn. It's got to be tough. He's 36. He's towards the end of his career, being away from his family in a pandemic. Like, it's just a lot of things. And this team hasn't been all that good, and he's not playing well at all. He's had 2 straight did not play his DNPs. And it's just becoming more and more apparent that he's going to be traded. Like, it's a foregone conclusion. I'd be pretty damn surprised if it doesn't happen, which just sucks. You've heard me say it before. I love Redick. JJ Redick's one of my favorite players, probably ever. Top 15 shooter of all time. Really good dude. Love his podcast. Just a good guy. But anyway, again, probably going to be traded. It's these three teams that we've been breaking down, that we've all been breaking down about: the 76ers, the Celtics, and the Nets, all being viable options for where JJ could be traded. And if you want some mock-ups of those teams, of those trades, check out the article. It was fun and very stressful to put together because of what I'm about to say. So if you want to see those mock-ups, check out the article. I'm not going to dive into that too much here. What I am going to talk about is the feasibility of each team and why. And so let's start off with Philly. I see this being the most likely team just because of what they've got to offer. And the fact that we know JJ was super important there when they made their playoff run, when they lost to the Raptors in 7 in 2019. He is very important to what they were doing. Had one of the best seasons of his career that year, and I think he just had a really good tenure with the Sixers. Like he just had some great numbers. I'm going to look that up right now to double check, but if I remember correctly, he was really, really damn good with those teams. And as I pulled that up here, those two seasons he was there, 2017, 2018, 2019, JJ averaged a career high, actually, in 2018, 2019, 18 points a game. He also shot, just 40%, a little under 40% from three that year, 42% the year prior. So JJ really a lot for those Sixers teams. Makes sense why he would want to go back. Makes sense why they would want him back. And they've got guys on their roster that are close, if not at the same value as JJ Redick, especially if you put them all together, which you got to do to make the money work. What this would do in a situation, obviously, the Sixers can always use more shooting when you've got a point guard that can't shoot. And for the Pelicans, it'll give them more depth and it'll shake up the roster a bit. So when you look at players on this team that could mix things up, it's going to be Tony Bradley. It's going to be Mike Scott. It's going to be Terrence Ferguson, Furkan Korkmaz, Vincent Poirier, and Picks. It's not going to be all of those guys in Picks by any means. The Pels aren't going to get 5 players out of this just for JJ Redick. I think depending on what the 76ers are willing to part with, depending on what they want in exchange, the Pels might have to send like a second rounder or something like that as well. But what I see here is Tony Bradley and Mike Scott being forwards that can add to the depth of the front court and can actually play minutes. Not significant minutes, but minutes when Steven Adams is not on the floor. They can come in and help protect the basket. Tony Bradley did that for the Jazz last year. Didn't do all that well, but he did it. Terrence Ferguson, just a one-year kind of guy that'll be sticking around. Freaking Korkmaz, a guy who at times can light it up and at times be really bad from deep. Vincent Poirier, I know absolutely nothing about. And then Picks, obviously, adding to the treasure trove of picks that the Pelicans have. And making it 3 guys like this, 3 lesser value guys like that, is about making the money work. You know, JJ Redick hasn't provided a lot of value this year, so I think that's what teams are going to go off of, so they can be a little bit more stingy in what they give back for JJ Redick. But Tony Bradley, Mike Scott, Terrence Ferguson, Furkan Korkmaz, Vincent Poirier, all not making a lot of money. This way, they're giving up quite a bit less value on the court in exchange for JJ Redick. But that way, they can make the money work too, and they incentivize it with picks. So that's what makes sense. Again, I dive into this more in the article, so you can check it out there. But if the Pels, this is the thing that a lot of people are wanting to know. If the Pels can get Matisse Thybulle in this situation anyway, anyhow, make it happen. Because the Pels need help defensively, and he is young, he is cheap, he's on a 3-year deal, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm going to look that up as well. But Matisse Thybulle, a young guy who, coming out of Washington, people knew him to be a talented defensive player, but he's been awesome. He can't shoot worth a damn. He can't do a whole lot of things offensively, but we know that on defense, he is going to contribute and make your team better. And the Pels need it. They just do. I'm trying to pull up Spot Track here. It looks like he's got 2 years remaining on his contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. So if the Pels could acquire him one way or another, That would be pretty good. Pretty good. Next, Celtics. More than likely, what we're looking at here for the Celtics is them parting with their trade exception of $28 million and draft capital. And draft capital. And the thing about the Celtics roster right now is they have a ton of bigs. That'd be the pull for me if they're willing to offer up a big, because the Pels could use it. And they've got a bunch of bigs that play regular minutes. Grant Williams or Daniel Tice are the two big ones that I really want. Then it's Robert Williams, Taco Fall, and Tristan Thompson. No, Pelicans fans, don't ask for Taco Fall. Don't do it. Just don't. It would be fun. It would be funny, but not worth it. I'd really like Tice because he shoots 38% from deep. He's on a one-year deal, and he's a veteran. Grant Williams, a young guy who's shooting fairly well from deep, if I remember correctly. I think 41%. And he's young, but he's on a little bit longer of a contract, less flexibility. So there you go. I like Tice. I think that would be the best option for the Pelicans if they could trade him straight up, and maybe the Pels send a couple seconds or something like that. But it's honestly about the value of JJ Redick. And are the Celtics going to be willing to part with Daniel Tice or any of their players for JJ Redick? That's the question with them. I think they're more viable than the Nets, and I'll tell you why in a second here. But if the Pelicans can come away with picks in the situation and like 2-3 picks, that'd probably be the best option. If they can somehow get the 21 draft pick from the Celtics, done. Done. And now the Nets. This is the tough one because I have no idea how or why the Nets make this move. As they're currently constructed, it just doesn't make sense. We talked about it before the season started, and it made sense because they didn't have James Harden and they had a bunch of other pieces. They just don't have that much to offer to the Pelicans in terms of picks and in terms of players, because the needs for the Pelicans and the Nets are the same. They need front court depth. They need help defensively. And the Pels need shooters. The Nets are loaded with offensive talent. James Harden, Kyrie, Kevin Durant, Joe Harris, which Joe Harris is not in the same echelon as these three, but he's a really good shooter, so we'll throw him in there. The thing I don't understand is why add an old veteran who can shoot like hell but won't be able to defend anyone to this roster when you've already, they just scored 147 points and lost to the Wizards. How does that make sense? It doesn't. It makes no logical sense to me whatsoever. The only way I see this working is if they give up Landry Shamet and a third team gets involved. Or Timothy Luwawu Cabarro, I think his name is. We're going to find that out too as we're looking this up. Timothy Luwawu Cabarro. Hell yeah, I got that right. Anyway, the only way I see this working is if they add a third team. That's the only thing that really will put this over the edge for me. That makes sense. And what third team that'll be, I don't know. The Bulls, the Raptors, the Heat, the Celtics, 76ers, whatever. There's teams out there that all need to make a move. And if they can send a big to the Nets or a big to the Pels or both, I don't know. Probably going to be the Cavs if that's going to work out, which would have to be probably JaVale McGee and Larry Nance. They'll more than likely want to get some picks and big depth. The Nets will. Because the Nets have no first-round picks for the next 7 years, all seconds, and I don't know what you do with those seconds. I mean, I'd assume that that's where JJ wants to go because it's where his family is, but it's just about making it work, and it just doesn't make any damn sense to me. don't know why the Nets would pull the trigger on this unless they can get that third team, unless they can get picks, unless they can get bigs. I mean, if they'll take Willie Hernan-Gomez, if they'll take Nico Melli, by all means. But the Pels have to get something back. And Landry Shamet has been shooting horribly over the last however many years. Probably last year and this year, at the end of last year and then this year. So what do you, like, what's the return? They need something, and it's probably defense, so probably not JJ Redick. I hope for their sake that they go for defense, not JJ Redick, because I don't know how they'd make it work. Anyway, today's show, we're getting some input from Jamal Amiri Hamed before I go, and he says Mo Bamba. I love it. I love it. Mo Bamba, who has not done a lot in a while. By the way, if you're on the YouTube feed, feel free to add in some comments and let us know. I love that. That's hilarious. You put 2 words, Mo Bamba. I love that. That's awesome. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for tuning in today. If you have any ideas, any thoughts, any comments, drop them on the YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe and like this video as well. Head over, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, whatever, make sure you subscribe or follow, depending on where you are listening to this podcast. And you leave a rate and review on Apple Podcasts. Again, we're really looking to bump those up, so that would we would really appreciate it. There are other things I was going to say. Check out bootcrewmedia.com for that article talking about JJ Redick as well. And of course, if you missed any part of this, watching this live stream on YouTube, hopefully this will be up soon. Otherwise, you can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, etc. And lastly, this is Pelicans Plus, brought to you by Boot Crew Media with your host, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter. And the way I usually wrap this up is the opposite of what I just did. So I'm going to do that instead. Elliot Clough. I am Elliot Clough, and this was Pelicans Plus.